I want to call you John, I want to call you Paul, I want to call you Eve. For those of you who are not aware, Eve, not the French Eve, but E-V-E. Writers like to write with pseudonyms, huh? Our former speaker has written under various pseudonyms, and I keep forgetting which name I want to refer to him as every time I look over at him.
You have a sign behind your head.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. We'll go with John. So yes, and Ms. Moss will be our final speaker of the day. You had referenced before the writers groups and the validity and kind of the usefulness of having a writers group, and I feel like I'm hitting something. I believe it was over the past 2 summers, or last summer, I believe it was.
Summer and winter, maybe.
Summer and winter, yes, somewhere in that time frame. She was gracious enough to actually lead a series of workshops specifically for seniors in memoir writing. And I know that you guys did a lot of going back and forth with each other and fine-tuning your works. And I know that from the comments that I got, there were a lot of people who felt they got a lot of value out of that and were able to really kind of crystallize something that they enjoyed and wanted to pass on to their family members or to show off to the rest of the world. And so we were very thankful that she was able to do that for us. We were very gratified to hear that some of the publicity around that led to her being able to do this same kind of work now through Passaic County on a county level. And so it's very gratified to hear that. But today she will be reading from her next book, Fruitless, which I just found out a few hours ago, has been purchased by Algonquin and should be published soon. So without further ado, and Ms. Moss.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm reading from my computer because it's not published yet. Otherwise, I'd be reading from the book, but I did just want to mention I do have copies of my short story collection today, and there's a short story in here about the Gertrude Stein statue in Bryant Park. All of the stories in this collection are set in Bryant Park in New York City, so if you have an interest in Bryant Park, there are a lot of good secrets, too, about Bryant Park in there, including one I'll give you now as a teaser that some of you might know, but I got to get a tour. If you picture Bryant Park, there's a meadow in the center of it, a big grassy field in the shape of a rectangle, and underneath that are stacks. There are 2 million books under there that they've used for storage underneath the park, and I got to get a tour of it. Pretty cool. Wow. There's a little, what I think of as a magical little trolley that runs along the ceiling level where someone somewhere else asks for a book, and then down in the stack someone runs around with white gloves on and gets it and puts it in the trolley, and it goes around up to whoever ordered it. And they also have a vault in there where one of the copies of the Declaration of Independence is. It's a really cool 1 to 2 block area full of a lot of interesting details. And so I had spent a lot of time there. My father had an apartment on Bryant Park, which changed a lot over the years, as some of you might know. And so I got fascinated, and it became the backdrop for a lot of fiction that I was writing. I have since moved on. I still write fiction, but I write, you were talking about the genres of fiction and nonfiction. I write a lot of what I guess is called creative nonfiction, which is essays, in addition to fiction writing, that are not exactly nonfiction. They're not journalistic. They're telling a story. They tend to be emotional and not exactly looking at the facts of something, but telling a story and using the craft that I would use in my fiction writing to write nonfiction. The excerpt I'm going to read to you is just about 4 pages long. It's 2 different chapters, and it's from what's called an illness memoir. That is a genre, a subgenre of memoir writing. But you'll see from this that it's not that much about illness. I don't, although I write a lot of scientific, creative nonfiction, I am interested in the science of it. I have studied something called narrative medicine at Columbia in New York City, if anyone's interested in learning more about that. So it's almost more about how our perceptions change and what we think about when we are confined by illness, which I think does change how we see the world. So it's 2 short chapters to give you a taste of what the book is like, and they're not next to each other in the book. So I'll start with chapter 4. Can you hear me in the back? Good. So chapter 4 is called The Feral Cat and the French Fries. For years now, I've been dancing a dance with a feral cat. Wiry and ugly, skinny as a fist, his face striped right down the middle, one half black, the other orange. He's a little unhoused ghost. I figure it's a he because he and Zonker howl at one another over the summer nights, the peepers in the background. Other nights he yowls by the compost bin all alone. I want to go to him, but if I make a sound, if I disturb the air currents between us, he can feel it in his whiskers and he vanishes. After Rosie the cat died, we got 2 badger-sized cats from the pound. Part Maine Coon, enormous all by themselves, and overfed on top of that, I admit. They're brother and sister and identical, except that Zonker has only one good eye. Craig, my husband, chose Zonker's name, and I named Crinkle. When they lie on top of me in bed, which I encourage them to do, I can hardly breathe under the weight of them. He was gone once for almost a year, the feral cat. I fretted, always looking, assuming his death. I hoped not from starvation, which seemed a protracted and awful way to die. But then I saw him under the rhododendron, plump almost, and I was filled with such joy. I leaned against the kitchen door, my arms folded, beaming, knowing that any noise would make him run down to the pond and then into the woods near the abbey. Do the monks feed him there? I hope he has somewhere to go where he can rely on someone. We have a neighbor, a woman with gray hair down to her waist. She rescues roosters, which makes her a bad neighbor, but a decent human being. She talks and talks, this neighbor, as though no one has ever listened to her before, and sometimes I just have to walk down her long driveway with her still talking at my back, telling me over and over again her same stories of loss. How do you make friends, she asked me once. How do you make friends? In summer, when we have our windows open, I can hear her encouraging her hens. Now, Lucy, I'll hear her say, I've told you 100 times not to step in the water dish. When my mother comes to stay with us in New Jersey, she and I sit in the sunroom at 5, drinking gin and looking out at the wildlife. There are groundhogs and wild turkey, an occasional chicken from next door comes clucking through the lilacs. We look for hummingbirds and orioles for the mallard family that returns every spring. After a diner lunch one day, Mom and I throw out our leftover French fries on the grass to see if we might attract a crow, or better yet, a turkey vulture. But nothing happens. We sit and drink our gin, talking intermittently about my father's death, or the Times book review, or whatever comes to mind, when all of a sudden there is the feral cat, out in the longish grass, all angled, thin as a reed. He pauses, lifts his head up, his ears antenna, sniffing the air. He lowers his head and begins gobbling the French fries, looking from side to side like a prisoner guarding his meal. We put our martini glasses down and lean toward him, drawn by the enormity of his hunger.